Welcome to the Buddhistisches Tor Berlin podcast. Here we share talks and reflections from our Buddhist center in Berlin, exploring themes such as meditation, ethics, and the path of awakening in everyday life. We are part of the Triratna Buddhist community, and our talks are offered freely in a spirit of generosity. We hope this episode supports your practice and your life.
Thank you for your welcome to the celebrated Saturday class here, known all over the Triratna world probably how many people come to this Saturday morning class. And I've been coming here for quite a long time now and doing talks at this class, and hence the sort of slight confusion over what I'm going to talk about this morning, because I've spoken so often at this class, I can never remember what I've talked about. And so these days, I rarely script talks. I prefer to speak more in the moment, as it were. It doesn't mean I haven't got any thoughts, and I'm not giving you proper attention. I definitely want to give you proper attention, but I like to, be here in the space and sort of see what emerges. But this morning, before we were meditating in the community, Arya Bandhu and I were having a cup of tea, and I said, I still am not sure what I want to really go into, having told Dharmasara that I'll talk about going for refuge, the great Buddhist act of going for refuge. And Arya Bandhu said, well, why don't you give a talk on the special precepts that Padmasambhava gave to Berlin? Padmasambhava being this figure that Padmasambhava has just mentioned, and reminding me of something that I spoke about 10 years ago. I don't think that was at a Saturday class, 2016. I don't even know if we had a Saturday class then. And I sat down to meditate, and sure enough, I thought, yes, that's the way to go. Although it needs a little bit of explanation. It's interesting you talked about Artikotu's lovely painting of Padmasambhava downstairs in the basement, and I did wonder about having him here so you could see who he is. So a little bit about Padmasambhava. The name means the lotus born. Padmasambhava is a very unusual figure in Buddhist history, a kind of semi-historical, semi-mythical, semi-legendary figure who kind of becomes an archetype of enlightenment, becomes an image of enlightenment in Buddhist tradition, and becomes even a sort of meditative deity on whom you meditate, you visualize, so that you evoke and invoke his qualities in your experience and, bring them into your daily life. This is quite an important feature of Buddhist meditational practice. In some traditions, you'd visualize the Buddha or you'd visualize another figure so that you would generate the particular qualities that they embody. And this is where a lot of Buddhist art really comes from. It comes from meditative experience and practice. And it's my main meditation practice, this visualization meditation of this figure who seated on a red lotus and wears gorgeous robes and a wonderful lotus cap, and has different sort of implements, and has this very enigmatic expression. It's a sort of ecstatic expression, a loving expression, a very intent expression. And this figure comes, as I say, out of history. He probably arose in India, but he's particularly associated with the introduction of Buddhism into Tibet in the 8th century, and becomes the center of great visionary experience and meditation for particular traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. And I felt a very strong attraction to this figure from a very young age. And I was initiated into this figure when I was ordained. And even the name Padmavajra is named, it's a name of Padmasambhava, because Sankarachta, my teacher, said, well, I know you have that connection. So it's a little bit strange to perhaps some of you, maybe this is your first time here, to be introduced to this figure. And even the special precepts he gives for Berlin. And I need to do a bit of background. So when did I start coming to Berlin, Arya Bandhu? 2013 I started coming to Berlin, and I've been coming every year. There was the interruptions of COVID and so on, but I've been coming twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, because I'm very inspired by the city. I really felt a very strong connection with the city when I came, looking at the sort of layers of history that were here, being aware of the sort of undercurrents, if you like, of this city, its great forces, if you like, but also seeing it as a city in the present, people going about their lives. I love visiting new cities anywhere, and what I love is just wandering around, just looking at people, just taking in life, and wondering what goes on. But also I connected very strongly with my Buddhist friends here who've created this incredible centre. I remember when I came here, I was just amazed by the dedication, because you come here and you think, oh, there must be some billionaire or some incredible organisation which is full of wealth that has made this. It's not. It's just come out of the heart, soul, the blood of Buddhists, giving their lives, their money, their dedication to create this. And I felt very connected with the Buddhists here, creating this place, and got very strong friends here that have developed over the years. Anyway, so I'm doing my meditation every day, meditating on Padmasambhava. I'm walking around Berlin, and one morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, I received some teachings. I'm being I'm sending myself up a bit here. But certain things occurred to me, if you like. What are the precepts that Padmasambhava would have if he was wandering around Berlin? How would he teach? How would he communicate to people now? And 4 things emerged. I think it was 4. So it's a simple set of 4 teachings that I'm going to talk about to you this morning. The first is arouse the great passion. Arouse the great passion. The second is live the great death. The third is hurl the lightning bolt of compassion. And the fourth one is revere and cherish the glorious mandala, the glorious sacred circle. So I'm going to go through these 4 things, and I hope I will be able to make them relevant to your own lives, your own spiritual practice. They'll probably be illustrated a little bit with strange stories from the life of Padmasambhava. I'm conscious that I'm rapidly running out of time because I have to finish at just before 1, don't I? Yes. Yeah, I think I do, don't I? And you'll all be walking out anyway before then. So first of all, let's look at arouse the great passion. It seems a very strange phrase to have in a Buddhist teaching, because aren't Buddhists supposed to leave their passions behind them, give up all craving and attachment and all that kind of thing, and go forth? Well, in Padmasambhava's tantric tradition, you get a sort of transmutation, if you like, of language. So in his tradition, you have what's known as Maharaga, the great passion, the passion that has been purified by the vision of emptiness, by the vision of voidness, by transcendental wisdom. So this is a very different kind of passion. This is the passion that really, one way of looking at it, is really evoked when you find, when you discover, if you like, and language doesn't quite work here, your spiritual ideal. The real spiritual ideal in your life that you find utterly magnetizing, utterly compelling, utterly fascinating. So you want to live for that. You want to live, in a sense, only for that. If you like, you fall in love with that spiritual ideal, and there can be nothing else that will satisfy. This is illustrated in a story from the life of Padmasambhava, and these stories can almost seem a bit like fairy stories, but I mean fairy stories in the best sense, in the highest sense. Last night, some of us went to see a performance of Stravinsky's Firebird, and it's so enchanting. It's kind of a fairy story in music, but a very powerful fairy story in music, just full of that wonderful Russian, French enchantment. Stravinsky wrote for the Ballet Russe, didn't he, in Paris under Diaghilev, and it had this, anyway, magic. So in this story, there's a beautiful young princess named Mandarava. Mandarava is a wonderful golden archetypal flower. She's the daughter of a very loving king and queen, and she's the great princess, and she'll probably inherit the kingdom. But she has other ideas because she has this very strong calling to be a Buddhist. She does not want to get married. The parents, of course, are trying to marry off to, various suitors, various kings and princes from different lands. She really doesn't want to be treated like that. Well, who would? She really doesn't want that. She wants to live a life of total dedication to Buddhist practice. She even goes off and scratches her cheeks and rubs red dirt all over her face, rips her garments so she can look ugly and scarred so that nobody will want her. Very, very determined young woman. Okay, mum and dad, king and queen. Okay, let's set her up in a nunnery. We'll get all her friends, and they can be nuns as well. That's the way they did it in those days. So they're all in this monastery, this nunnery together, practicing Buddhism. They've managed to contain this outbreak of passion for the Dharma. That's what we tend to do, or what people tend to do. Yes, you can have your Buddhism, dear, but, just on Saturdays, not the other days of the week. That's fine. It's a nice hobby. But anyway, one day she's walking up and down, and this strange, beautiful man appears, and she faints at his beauty, absolutely faints in his presence, and he revives her, and and she realizes this is a great teacher. It's Padmasambhava who's come. He saw that there's great potential here. He's come to teach her. He's set up in the monastery or the nunnery as the teacher, and everything is that, they're really taking off in their spiritual practice together. But somebody sees that there's a man in the nunnery. Oof, this is terrible. This is really, really bad. This is, he must be up to something. In any case, he's a foreigner. Topical. He's a foreigner, very, very dodgy, very, very dodgy with our women, a foreigner. So the rumor goes back to the king. So the soldiers are sent. Padmasambhava's dragged out and, beaten up and so on. Mandarava's saying, this is my teacher. What are you doing? She's incarcerated in a pit of thorns so she can't see. He's burnt at the stake in front of everybody. Of course, it being a story of a great enlightened being, the fire never goes out. he appears in the midst of lotuses in the flame, dancing with Mandalava, many forms of Mandalava. The king repents and everything goes on beautifully. But it ends this particular story with Mandalava, this very, very beautiful woman singing an incredible song of praise to Padmasambhava. And what she does is picks out the beauty of his features, the incredible beauty of his features and the meaning of them in terms of the description of the enlightened state. What's important about the story, it's not to be taken in any way literally, because Mandalava in the tradition is seen as the ideal disciple, the ideal Buddhist disciple, whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter, or however you identify, doesn't matter. You're someone who is utterly determined to live this life, and you have a strong sense of the beauty of the spiritual ideal, and you want to live from that passion always. Always. I think this is tremendously underestimated part of Buddhist practice, especially in the West. Usually people come along because they want to find relaxation. They come along because they're stimulated by the ideas. But really you don't make much progress until your passion gets involved in this life, until your emotions start to flow into it. Our teacher Sangharakshita has this maxim, which he realized many years ago, back in his very early days in India. The central issue for most people in the spiritual life, any spiritual life, whether you're Buddhist, Christian, Sufi, whatever it might be, is to find emotional equivalence to intellectual understanding. We know everything. These days you can know any teaching, you can find any teaching. But are your emotions involved? Are you really touched, in the heart by what you're reading about, what you're thinking about? What makes you get out of bed in the morning? What makes you really want to change your life? There has to be that passion. There has to be that desire. Frankly, I don't really care whether or not people become Buddhists. It'd be great if they did. It'd be great if everybody became a Buddhist. What's important to me is that people find their passion and they find the thing, assuming it's an ethical thing and it's not going to harm anybody, that they really live from and really live out in all the areas of their life. It's so important. And to do that, there has to be that discovery of beauty, of something really magnetic in whether it's a spiritual ideal or an artistic ideal, whatever it may be. It was very interesting sitting there meditating after this conversation with Arya Bandhu, and I was sitting meditating with Dharmasara and Arya Bandhu, and I realized I really loved these men. I hope you don't mind me saying that in public, guys. I just love them, with a passion, if you like, a quiet passion, perhaps an English passion. But I just love them. I just love them because they're my brothers in this life. We share this life together. And Arya Bandhu had stimulated me just over a cup of tea with just a few stray words. It's what friends can do for one another, can't they? And my emotions were flowing towards this class this morning. So passion, we need it. But we also need to be prepared to die. Mandalava was prepared to die. Padmasambhava was prepared to die. So there's the second little precept, little aphorism. Live the great death. Live the great death. Strange way of talking, perhaps paradoxically. If you read the life of Padmasambhava, if you hear lectures on the life of Padmasambhava, you'll hear very early on, quite quickly, that he spent a lot of his time in Indian cremation grounds, Indian charnel grounds, Indian burial grounds. Well, not burial grounds. Usually in those days, it was where the dead were just left. He was in fact exiled there. He himself was a kind of foundling. He was again, a fairy story. He was found in the bed of a lotus by a king who had no son, who adopted him and trained him to be the king of the kingdom. He didn't want to be. It's always dangerous, I think, to adopt a child who's popped out of a lotus flower. It's you're really heading for something, I think. Sometimes just having children in the usual way, you don't quite know what you're going to get. But out of a lotus flower, risky. And of course, he started to really misbehave. I won't go into all the details. He started to behave in a crazy way because he could not be contained in that situation. Could not be. You have that feeling sometimes, don't you, that your life is being set on tracks. That it's, other people want you to live their life. We might have felt that in childhood. It can even go on in adulthood. That we're living this life for other people, their dreams and aspirations, and that's terribly stifling. So he had that kind of feeling as a young man. This is ridiculous. And he started to behave in a very, very crazy way. He practiced what in tantric Buddhism is called mad observance. Mad observance, just acting very, very strangely. And he was exiled. He really upset so many people that people wanted him gone. In fact, they wanted him executed. But the king said, no, but we'll exile him. I know where the best exile is. It's the great cemetery of Chili Grove. Cool grove, cold forest, a vast cemetery where the dead are left, which is a very spooky place, full of all sorts of flesh-eating gods and goddesses. Really, really odd place. And also a place that is regarded as unclean. In India, cremation grounds, the people who work in the cremation grounds are regarded as outcast by traditional Brahmanism. These are seen as, very, very polluted places. So he embraces being an outcast. If you like, he's sent out into the wilderness. He becomes thoroughly unacceptable to polite society. This is a very strong theme in Indian tantric Buddhism. The early Indian tantrics are unacceptable in wider society, almost deliberately. They want to deliberately court rejection. They don't want to fit in. But of course, it's in these spaces that you discover wonderful things. As our teacher once said, talking about a particular period in his life where he felt sent out into the wilderness, into the desert. He said, the desert is a wonderful place because in the desert, everything can become clear. In the desert, the desert is the place of vision. The desert is where something new can really open up. So in the cremation ground, Padmasambhava confronts all the deep, if you like, fears, all the deep forces, tonic forces, if you like, in the world he's in. Everything that you could say that's repressed, all the energy that's sort of locked up in all kinds of repressed things. He confronts particularly fear, death, all of those things, and then the cremation ground becomes the place of initiation. The place where you can receive deeper teachings, deeper visions for the benefit not just of yourself, but of others. In India, in the tantric imaginary, there are 8 great cremation grounds, and they're all named. They've all got their particular gods. They've all got their particular goddesses. They're all crazy places where the blood-drinking ogresses will dance before you and empty out their entrails and eat them and show their sex very freely to you. And you have to sit there in ecstasy, gazing at them and communicating to them. Communicating. What that communication would be, I cannot imagine. but you bring them onto the path. You bring them into this life. In other words, in facing death, in living the great death, you move to a great rebirth, a great spiritual rebirth. And look, sometimes when we take up Buddhist practice, we're offered a wonderful evolving path. Everything's going to be great. We're going to get to the happiness of enlightenment and all the wonderful qualities. And that's true. But then there also does need to be the health warning. You'll find that you have to give up a lot of things, because you'll reach points in your life where you can't go forward because there's habitual material in the way. You might even find, I'm not saying this is inevitable, you might even find that your meditation practice, your Buddhist practice, brings you into conflict with your nearest and dearest. The people who are very, very close to you, and that can be a very, very poignant time, because you feel that you're growing. You feel freer. You feel that there's great change happening. But your friends or even your family, they don't like the change. They sort of don't entirely like that you're happier. And it's not because of them. It's because of this other thing that you're doing that's opening up. And this can be very, very disconcerting. It can be very, very challenging. But it happens. It's a great test. Because the old life, if you like, can't sustain. It can't sustain. It's dying. So you have to live through this and emerge out of the other side. You also have periods of great confusion because of this. There are states of great confusion which are very disturbing, but they're actually very positive, because you can't go on in the old way. The new way hasn't opened up. And you're sort of between two worlds, the one not yet dead and the other struggling to be born. I think that's a quote from an old Victorian poet, isn't it? Matthew Arnold, I think. But it's a wonderful phrase. The one not yet dead, the other struggling to be born. So you have to live this. And actually, you get used to it after a while. Don't you, Lalatarani? You get used to this thing of, everything's falling apart, and yet it's partly because of the ecstasy that's sort of opening up. Everything's falling apart, and yet there's a kind of ecstasy that opens up. It's a bit like that. Sort of continual spiritual death and rebirth, transformation. So let's move on. But you're not doing it for its own sake. You're not just living that life and grooving on that, because, it does become exciting when you live like that. There's a purpose. There's an intent. There's a wonderful, just have a sip, another fairy story where Padmasambhava wants a particular initiation from this incredible goddess named Surya Chandra Siddhi, the union of the solar and lunar energies, what's known as a Darkini. And he really wants this initiation, and there's a whole story about how he finds his way into her presence. Sees this wonderful figure who embodies all of the Buddha's enlightened qualities. And she says, that all the Buddhas are in me. I am the teacher. He says, I know, I see. She says, okay, you're ready for initiation. And she transforms him into a tiny syllable, an Indian syllable, hung, and then eats him. I mean, imagine going along to the Buddhist center and, you get eaten. Well, maybe you are being eaten and you don't know it. And she eats him, swallows him, and different parts of her body initiates him. And then he emerges, completely endowed with all these extraordinary qualities and filled with what he needs for the next phase of his journey, which is bringing Buddhism to Tibet, which is going to be a very, very big task. So spending time in these places with these beings is so that you can do the next thing, which is hurl the lightning bolt of compassion. It's an interesting phrase, the lightning bolt of compassion. You know, we don't often associate compassion with lightning bolts. But Padmasambhava is sometimes called the lightning bolt of compassion, the thunderbolt of compassion. So compassion in Buddhism is something very, very active. Funnily enough, it's often associated with the masculine principle. Very, very active, very precise. It's got nothing to do with pity, nothing to do with sentimentality. Nothing to do with, you know, making terrible mistakes because of your sentimentality and making things worse rather than better. The lightning bolt is also a wisdom symbol. It's called a Vajra. I don't think we've got one handy, but it's like a sort of scepter. You see it in Tibetan ritual. And somebody who has a Vajra, they have this quality of wisdom and compassion. This very, very precise, not just the feeling of real love for other people, but this very precise awareness of what the individual actually needs to live this life, what they need there and then in this moment. Padmasambhava is particularly associated with this, with what's known in Buddhism as skillful means, the skillful application of wisdom and compassion to a particular individual, finding the specific teaching, even the right word at the right time for that person. It's a very, very rare, very, very rare quality. One can only kind of just revere it and hope for it. But he has that, and he has what's known as a mudra, a hand gesture with which he holds the Vajra. Very often they call it, in the West rather vulgarly, they call it the demon subduing mudra. But it doesn't mean that. The real meaning is, from the Tibetan, is it's the mudra that represents the mastery of all appearances and existence. Because Padmasambhava sees that everything is change, everything is shunyata, everything arises and passes, everything is empty, everything is a magnificent display. It's real to all the individuals undergoing all their ups and downs and so on. But for him, he's not taken in by appearances. So that means he can precisely help the person. He doesn't buy into their particular trip. He doesn't get brought down by their particular concerns. He can enter, communicate, be highly empathic, highly communicative, and show what is really needed. This is why traditionally the Tibetans had so much love for Padmasambhava. It said he connected so strongly with people, so individually, so brilliantly, and yet not caught up in, all of their stuff, so that they can really use they can really benefit from him. It's said in the Tibetan tradition that Padmasambhava was invited to Tibet because the king and another monk were trying to build a monastery, a wonderful monastery where people could practice, meditate, trying to build a center, a monastery. But the building work would go on in the day. But overnight, the gods of place would take it all apart. They weren't happy with that. And it's like that. It's a bit like that in our individual lives and collective lives. We're trying to build a Buddhist practice, and overnight it gets taken apart by our own gods within, if you like, and goddesses that don't want us to do that. And the same, I'm sure this project involved lots of slips and difficulties. Right now, we're building, this centre is building a wonderful retreat centre out in the countryside. And there's been so many difficulties. It's like the gods of the land are really putting up a lot of problems, in the form of money, the main god of the land these days. So Padmasambhava had to tame the gods. We have to tame the gods. And it's interesting the way he did it. Traditionally, there was a great magic contest. But it always resolves when, because of he's the master of all appearances, they reveal the heart of their lives. And the word for heart of their life is also the word for their secret names. It's the same meaning. In other words, they tell him who they really are. And because he knows who they really are, he has mastery. And he doesn't repress them. He enlists them. He gives them great treasures to care for. And he invites them to help with the work. So Padmasambhava is associated with the transformation of energies, so that the energies serve, the Buddhist life, Buddhist practice. This is a whole topic in itself. So eventually the gods start to help the building of this great monastery. They join in. The people work in the day, the gods work at night. The monastery gets done very, very quickly because of this great transformation of our energies. You probably feel this sometimes. You're getting along with your life. It seems to be going well, but there's a drag. There's some hidden drag going on. You can't quite give yourself to this thing fully, or there's always things happening that trip you up. Well, you've got to find out the name of that drag. You've got to find the name of that pull. What is it? What isn't being spoken to? What needs to be enlisted? What am I missing here? What's the name of that energy? How can I bring that energy on board? How can I give it a job? I mean, I really like the Minions. You know that, sorry, my low culture here, Firebird last night, but I like the Minions. They're always, don't the Minions, they're searching for somebody who can really test them, the most evil person in the world, aren't they? And they're always acting up. So these forces, they're searching for a great king or a great queen, a great master that is worthy of their service, because they've got a lot of energy and they want to use it for somebody worthwhile. So you have to find that. You have to find that in your life. It's a bit like the Great Passion again, finding that ideal that you can really serve. And then finally, nearly there, cherishing or revering or building even the glorious mandala. So I mentioned this great monastery that was built, Samye Monastery. Samye means the glorious. Sometimes people wonder, well, can't you just kind of be Buddhist without places? Can't you just sort of you can be online, can travel around the world online and a bit of this, bit of that, bit of the other. But it's so shallow. I mean, never leave. I mean, we've got a phrase used in our Triratna these days on our online thing, an at-home retreat. An at-home retreat. Look at Lalacharatna's face. You can't have an at-home retreat. You have to go away if you're going to retreat. You have to go somewhere to practice. I mean, it's good. It's good that people who can't go on a retreat can do it at home. But you need to go somewhere. You need to make something, to make a difference. So we need places. We need places where what's called the Sangha, the spiritual community, the community of Buddhist practitioners, can gather, can meditate together, can study together, can listen to the Dharma together, can just love each other together. I mean, in that wonderful spirit of friendship. We need places, our own place, where we can go on retreat. Hence the purchase of the Rotterberg, the Red Castle, out where the bricks for Berlin used to be made. It's wonderfully wonderful imagery, very Padmasambhava imagery. It's great going out there. I really enjoy going to the industrial museum nearby, seeing all these machines that made the bricks and thinking, this is an ideal place for a retreat centre in the forest nearby. This was an area that created this great city, and now it's associated with the creation of something else, the creation of a spiritual community, a creation of a rich Buddhist world for the benefit of others. It's very interesting in the in the story, again, fairy stories, you could say, in the life of Padmasambhava, when they do the dedication ceremony, when Padmasambhava dedicates all the wonderful images in these wonderful shrine rooms and meditation rooms, the dedication is so powerful, the images get up and start walking around and chatting to people. I mean, imagine that, it's so alive. It's so alive with spiritual practice, with spiritual quality, that you feel that intimacy with the embodiments of your spiritual ideal. That's what a Buddhist center should really be. It should be a mandala, a sacred circle, where the images of enlightenment, of your spiritual ideal, are really alive. They're made alive through your practice, through your meditation, through your study, through your friendship. That brings enlightenment alive in place. So I think I should end just there. I've managed to do it in decent time. I hope you found this helpful, this little return to a sort of, a teaching that was revealed 10 years ago in a tiny room in the Chintamani community in not far from here at 3:00 in the morning. How does it go? Arouse the great passion, live the great death, hurl the lightning bolt of compassion, revere the glorious mandala. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this talk, you are warmly invited to visit Buddhistisches Tor Berlin in Kreuzberg. We offer meditation, Dharma talks, and courses that support practice in everyday life. You'll find more information in the episode description.